My name is Marcus, and for 2 years I was a blood infiltrator living deep inside enemy CRIP territory, the most dangerous undercover operation in gang history that required me to completely erase my identity and become someone I wasn't just to survive. What I'm about to tell you will blow your mind because it's not just about gang espionage. It's about how I spent 24 months living as a fake CRIP member, gathering intelligence on their operations while knowing that discovery meant certain death, not just for me, but for my entire family. From January 2002 to December 2003, I was Marcus Tank Williams to my blood brothers, but to the Grape Street Watts Crips, I was Devon D. Block Johnson, a loyal soldier who had earned their trust, learned their secrets, and gained access to their most sensitive operations. If you think you understand what it means to live a double life, if you think you know what psychological pressure looks like, you're about to learn why infiltrating enemy gang territory is the most mentally destructive thing a human being can do to themselves. The information I gathered during those 2 years led to the downfall of the most powerful CRIP set in Los Angeles. But the cost of that success was my sanity, my identity, and nearly my life. Before we go deeper, let me be absolutely clear about why I'm sharing this story. I'm not here to glorify gang espionage or make infiltration sound exciting or glamorous. I'm here to warn you about what happens when you live so deep in deception that you forget who you really are, when the line between your real identity and your fake identity disappears completely. For 2 years, I was an undercover operative for the Treetop Piru Bloods, tasked with infiltrating the Grape Street Watts Crips to gather intelligence about their operations, their weaknesses, and their plans for expansion into blood territory. I thought I was a master spy, using my acting abilities and psychological skills to fool our enemies while serving my set. I was wrong about everything. I wasn't a master spy. I was a broken man living in constant terror of discovery, slowly losing my grip on reality as I tried to maintain multiple identities simultaneously. I wasn't serving my set. I was destroying my own mental health while gathering information that would be used to plan violence and death. I wasn't fooling our enemies. I was fooling myself into thinking that I could live as someone else for years without losing track of who I really was. The infiltration operation was successful by every tactical measure, but it cost me everything that made me human and taught me that some victories are so expensive they're indistinguishable from defeats. I grew up in Compton during the late 1980s, when gang warfare was reaching new levels of sophistication and psychological complexity throughout Los Angeles County. My father was a Vietnam veteran who taught me about military tactics and psychological operations before he died from complications related to Agent Orange exposure when I was 16. My mother worked as a nurse, trying to keep our family together while dealing with the trauma of losing her husband and raising 3 children in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. The Treetop Piru Bloods weren't just a gang in our area. They were the dominant social and economic force, offering protection, income, and most importantly for a kid like me, a chance to use the tactical knowledge my father had taught me in service of something larger than myself. I joined when I was 17, but unlike most recruits who started as street soldiers or drug dealers, I was identified early as having psychological and analytical abilities that could be valuable for intelligence operations. My ability to read people, adapt to different social situations, and maintain emotional control under pressure made me a natural candidate for undercover work, the most dangerous and psychologically demanding role in gang warfare. The older members began training me in infiltration techniques, identity construction, and the psychological skills necessary to live as someone else for extended periods. I thought this training was preparing me for a challenging but manageable assignment, but it was actually preparing me for 2 years of psychological torture that would nearly destroy my mind. The role of an infiltrator in gang warfare is unlike any other position in criminal organizations, requiring a combination of acting ability, psychological resilience, and tactical intelligence that few people possess. Unlike law enforcement undercover operations that have support systems and extraction protocols, gang infiltration is a solo mission where discovery means death and there's no backup coming to save you. You have to create a completely fictional identity that will withstand scrutiny from people who are naturally suspicious and violent, then live that identity so completely that even you begin to believe it's real. You have to gather intelligence on your targets while appearing to be loyal to them, building genuine relationships with people you're planning to betray, and maintaining the emotional detachment necessary to send information that will be used to hurt or kill the people who trust you. The psychological pressure is constant and overwhelming. You're always one mistake away from exposure, always one suspicious question away from torture and death, always balancing the need to gather information against the need to maintain your cover. Most dangerously, you have to suppress your real personality so completely that you risk losing track of who you actually are, becoming so absorbed in your fake identity that you can't find your way back to your authentic self. I thought I was mentally strong enough to handle this pressure, but 2 years of living as someone else nearly drove me insane. The preparation phase for my infiltration of the Grape Street Crips took 6 months of intensive training and identity construction that was more complex than anything attempted in gang warfare before or since. The Treetop Peru leadership understood that this operation would require a level of psychological sophistication that went far beyond traditional undercover work, so they brought in experts, former military intelligence officers, ex-police detectives, and even a psychologist who specialized in identity disorders to help design my cover identity and prepare me for the mental challenges ahead. The fictional identity of Devon D. Block Johnson was constructed with meticulous attention to detail, a complete backstory including childhood memories, family relationships, and personal experiences that would explain my personality and motivations, documentation including fake identification, school records, and employment history that would withstand background checks, and most importantly, a psychological profile that was different enough from my real personality to fool people who knew me, while being similar enough that I could maintain it consistently under pressure. The training involved months of method-acting exercises, psychological conditioning, and stress testing designed to ensure that I could maintain my cover identity even under extreme pressure or physical torture. By the time the operation began, Devon Johnson felt almost as real to me as Marcus Williams, which should have been a warning sign about the psychological dangers ahead. The insertion phase of the operation began in January 2002 when I moved to Watts and began the slow process of establishing myself as a legitimate member of the community while gradually making contact with Grape Street Crip members. The approach had to be subtle and natural. I couldn't just show up and ask to join the gang because that would immediately raise suspicions about my motives and background. Instead, I got a job at a local auto repair shop, rented a small apartment in Crip territory, and began frequenting the same bars, restaurants, and social venues where gang members were known to hang out. The process of building relationships and gaining trust was painstakingly slow, requiring me to demonstrate loyalty and reliability through small actions over many months before anyone would consider bringing me into more serious criminal activities. I had to prove myself as Devon Johnson, showing that I was tough enough to handle conflict, smart enough to be useful, and most importantly, trustworthy enough to be given access to sensitive information and operations. The psychological challenge was maintaining my cover identity consistently across hundreds of interactions with dozens of different people, never forgetting my backstory, never slipping into my real personality, never showing any sign that I was anything other than exactly who I claimed to be. After 8 months of careful relationship building, I was finally invited to participate in my first criminal operation with the Grape Street Crips, marking the beginning of the most dangerous phase of the infiltration. The integration phase of the operation from September 2002 to June 2003 was when I gained full acceptance as a trusted member of the Grape Street Crips and began gathering the intelligence that would ultimately lead to their downfall. During this period, I participated in drug operations, territorial enforcement actions, and planning sessions for major criminal activities, all while secretly documenting everything I learned and passing information back to my Treetop Peru handlers through a complex communication system that involved dead drops, coded messages, and carefully scheduled meetings in neutral locations. The psychological pressure during this phase was overwhelming. I was living a complete lie every moment of every day, building genuine friendships with people I was betraying, and participating in criminal activities that violated my personal moral code while maintaining the emotional detachment necessary to gather useful intelligence. The most difficult aspect was the cognitive dissonance of caring about people I was planning to destroy. Many of the Grape Street Crip members I worked with were decent people who had been forced into gang life by circumstances beyond their control, and I found myself genuinely liking and respecting some of the same people whose downfall I was orchestrating. The internal conflict between my mission objectives and my human emotions was tearing me apart, but I couldn't show any sign of weakness or doubt without risking exposure and death. The intelligence I gathered during my infiltration of the Grape Street Crips was more comprehensive and valuable than anything that had ever been obtained through gang espionage operations. I documented their entire organizational structure, including the identities and roles of all key personnel, their decision-making processes, and the personal relationships and rivalries that influenced their strategic planning. I mapped their financial operations, including drug distribution networks, money laundering schemes, and the legitimate businesses they used as fronts for criminal activities. I identified their weapons caches, safe houses, and communication systems, providing detailed information about their defensive capabilities and vulnerabilities. Most importantly, I gained access to their strategic planning sessions, learning about their expansion plans, their alliances with other criminal organizations, and their specific intentions regarding Treetop Peru territory and operations. The intelligence was so detailed and comprehensive that it gave my real organization a complete picture of enemy capabilities and intentions, allowing them to plan countermeasures and offensive operations with unprecedented precision and effectiveness. But gathering this information required me to become so deeply embedded in the enemy organization that I began to lose track of which side I was really on, which identity was real, and which mission I was actually serving. The psychological breakdown that occurred during the final months of my infiltration was gradual but devastating, as the stress of maintaining multiple identities and living in constant fear of discovery finally overwhelmed my mental defenses. By mid-2003, I was experiencing severe anxiety, paranoia, and dissociative episodes where I couldn't remember which identity I was supposed to be maintaining, or which set of memories and relationships were real. The boundaries between Marcus Williams and Devon Johnson had become so blurred that I sometimes forgot which name to respond to, which backstory to reference, and which loyalties to express in different situations. I was having nightmares about being discovered and tortured, panic attacks when anyone asked unexpected questions about my background, and periods of depression where I couldn't see any way out of the situation that didn't involve my death or the death of people I had come to care about. The isolation was complete. I couldn't talk to anyone about what I was experiencing because revealing my true identity would mean death, but continuing to live the lie was destroying my sanity. I began making mistakes in my cover story, showing inconsistencies in my behavior, and displaying signs of psychological distress that could have exposed the entire operation if anyone had been paying close attention. The Treetop Peru leadership began planning my extraction because they could see that I was approaching a complete mental breakdown that would compromise the mission and potentially get me killed. The extraction phase of the operation, planned for December 2003, was the most dangerous part of the entire infiltration because it required me to disappear from the Grape Street Crips without raising suspicions about my true identity or mission. The plan involved staging my apparent death in a way that would explain my disappearance while protecting the intelligence I had gathered and ensuring that no one would investigate my background or discover the infiltration. The Treetop Peru leadership arranged for a fake drive-by shooting that would make it appear that I had been killed by a rival gang, complete with staged crime scene evidence, false witness testimony, and even a fake funeral to convince anyone who might be suspicious about my disappearance. The psychological challenge was maintaining my Devon Johnson identity right up until the moment of extraction, never showing any sign that I knew what was coming or that I was anything other than a loyal Grape Street Crip member who was about to become a victim of gang violence. The operation required split-second timing and flawless execution because any mistake could expose the entire infiltration and result in retaliation against my real family and friends. On December 15, 2003, Devon Johnson was killed in a drive-by shooting, and Marcus Williams returned from the dead after 2 years of living as someone else. But the person who came back was not the same person who had gone in. The immediate aftermath of the extraction was chaos and confusion, as I tried to readjust to my real identity while dealing with the psychological trauma of 2 years of deep cover infiltration. The Treetop Peru leadership debriefed me extensively, extracting every piece of intelligence I had gathered and using it to plan a series of operations against the Grape Street Watts Crips that would cripple their organization and eliminate them as a threat to blood territory. The information I provided led to successful raids on their drug operations, the arrest of key personnel, and ultimately the complete dismantling of their criminal enterprise. From a tactical perspective, the infiltration was one of the most successful intelligence operations in gang warfare history, providing actionable intelligence that gave my organization decisive advantages over our enemies. But the personal cost was devastating. I was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and a complete inability to form genuine relationships with anyone because I had spent 2 years lying to everyone I met. The skills that had made me successful as an infiltrator, the ability to deceive, manipulate, and maintain false identities, had become so ingrained that I couldn't turn them off, even when I was back among people who were supposed to be my friends and allies. The long-term psychological consequences of the infiltration operation affected every aspect of my life for years after the mission ended. The constant deception and identity confusion had damaged my ability to maintain stable relationships, hold steady employment, or even trust my own memories and perceptions. I experienced frequent flashbacks to traumatic events that had occurred during the infiltration, panic attacks when anyone asked questions about my past, and periods of dissociation where I couldn't remember which identity I was supposed to be maintaining. The guilt over the people I had betrayed was overwhelming. Many of the Grape Street Crip members I had worked with were arrested, imprisoned, or killed as a result of the intelligence I provided, including people who had treated me with kindness and respect during my time undercover. The cognitive dissonance of caring about people I had destroyed was impossible to resolve, creating a form of moral injury that affected my ability to see myself as a good person or to believe that my actions had been justified. The Treetop Peru organization provided some support and counseling, but they were primarily interested in the intelligence value of the operation rather than my psychological well-being, and they had no real understanding of the mental health challenges created by long-term infiltration operations. The impact of the infiltration on the Grape Street Watts Crips was swift and devastating, as the intelligence I had provided was used to plan a series of coordinated attacks that eliminated their leadership, destroyed their operations, and scattered their membership throughout Los Angeles County. Within 6 months of my extraction, over 30 key members had been arrested or killed, their drug distribution network had been completely dismantled, and their territory had been absorbed by rival organizations. The precision of the attacks and the accuracy of the intelligence made it clear that someone had provided inside information, but the staged death of Devon Johnson had been so convincing that no one suspected infiltration. The psychological impact on the surviving members was enormous. They realized that their organization had been completely compromised, that someone they had trusted had been gathering intelligence on their every move, and that their enemies had capabilities they had never imagined. The paranoia and mistrust that followed made it impossible for them to rebuild their organization, as members became suspicious of each other and reluctant to share sensitive information or participate in coordinated operations. The infiltration had not just provided tactical intelligence, it had destroyed the social trust that made organized criminal activity possible, creating lasting damage that went far beyond the immediate operational losses. The broader impact of the infiltration operation on gang warfare throughout Los Angeles was significant and long-lasting, as other criminal organizations realized that traditional security measures were inadequate to protect against sophisticated intelligence operations. The success of the Treetop Peru infiltration demonstrated that any gang could potentially be compromised by enemy operatives, leading to increased paranoia, more stringent security protocols, and a general breakdown in trust within and between criminal organizations. Other gangs began implementing counterintelligence measures, conducting background investigations on new members, and developing techniques for detecting potential infiltrators. The psychological warfare aspect of the operation was equally important. The knowledge that enemies might be living among them as trusted friends and allies created a climate of suspicion and fear that made normal gang operations more difficult and less effective. The infiltration had changed the rules of gang warfare, making every relationship potentially suspect and every piece of information potentially compromised. The long-term effect was to make criminal organizations more isolated, more paranoid, and less capable of the coordination and trust necessary for large-scale operations. The ethical implications of gang infiltration operations are complex and troubling, raising questions about the morality of deception, betrayal, and the use of human relationships as weapons in criminal conflicts. During my 2 years undercover, I formed genuine friendships with people who trusted me completely, shared their personal struggles and fears with me, and treated me as a brother and family member. Using those relationships to gather intelligence that would be used to destroy their lives was a form of psychological warfare that violated basic principles of human decency and trust. The fact that these people were criminals involved in illegal activities didn't eliminate the moral complexity of betraying their trust and friendship. The psychological damage to the infiltrator is also an ethical concern. Asking someone to live a complete lie for years, to suppress their real identity and personality, and to maintain emotional detachment while building intimate relationships is a form of psychological torture that can cause permanent mental health damage. The success of the operation from a tactical perspective doesn't justify the human cost to all parties involved, and the long-term consequences for individuals and communities raise serious questions about whether such operations should ever be undertaken. The technical aspects of maintaining a deep cover identity for 2 years required skills and techniques that went far beyond basic deception or acting ability. Every aspect of my fictional identity had to be consistent and believable, from my speech patterns and body language to my knowledge of local history and cultural references. I had to develop new habits, preferences, and personality traits that were different from my real self, while being careful not to make them so different that they seemed artificial or forced. The backstory had to be detailed enough to withstand casual questioning, but not so elaborate that I might forget important details under pressure. Most importantly, I had to develop emotional responses and relationship patterns that were consistent with my cover identity, while maintaining enough psychological distance to remember that none of it was real. The cognitive load of maintaining all these fictional elements simultaneously while gathering intelligence and participating in criminal activities was enormous, requiring constant mental effort and creating chronic stress that accumulated over time. The technical challenge was not just remembering what to say and do, but becoming someone else so completely that the deception was unconscious and automatic. The communication protocols for passing intelligence back to my handlers were necessarily complex and dangerous, requiring multiple layers of security to prevent detection while ensuring that critical information reached the treetop Piru leadership in time to be actionable. The system involved dead drops at predetermined locations, coded messages hidden in seemingly innocent communications, and carefully scheduled meetings in neutral territory where I could provide detailed briefings without being observed by enemy surveillance. Each communication method had backup protocols in case the primary system was compromised, and the entire network was designed to be compartmentalized so that the discovery of one element wouldn't expose the entire operation. The psychological pressure of these communications was intense. Every meeting was a potential trap, every message was a risk of exposure, and every piece of intelligence I passed could potentially be traced back to me if the security protocols failed. The paranoia of constantly watching for surveillance, checking for signs that my communications had been intercepted, and worrying about whether my handlers might be compromised was exhausting and contributed to the mental breakdown that occurred during the final months of the operation. The relationship between infiltrator and target is one of the most psychologically complex and morally ambiguous aspects of undercover operations. During my time with the Grape Street Watts Crips, I developed genuine affection and respect for many of the people I was betraying, recognizing that they were human beings with families, dreams, and struggles that extended far beyond their criminal activities. Some of them became mentors who taught me valuable life lessons. Others became friends who supported me through difficult times, and a few became like brothers who would have died to protect me if they had known I was in danger. The knowledge that I was gathering information that would be used to destroy their lives created a form of cognitive dissonance that was almost unbearable. I cared about these people while simultaneously planning their downfall. I appreciated their trust while systematically violating it, and I enjoyed their friendship while knowing that I would ultimately betray them. The psychological damage from this kind of relationship is permanent and profound, creating trust issues and emotional detachment that affect every subsequent relationship. The ability to maintain intimate friendships while planning betrayal is a skill that, once developed, becomes difficult to turn off even in legitimate relationships. The impact of the infiltration on my family and legitimate relationships was severe and long-lasting, as the secrecy and deception required by the operation made it impossible to maintain normal connections with people who weren't part of the criminal world. For 2 years, I couldn't tell my mother, siblings, or childhood friends what I was doing, where I was living, or why I had disappeared from their lives. The cover story provided by the Treetop Piru leadership explained my absence, but didn't allow for regular contact or normal family relationships. The psychological isolation was complete. I couldn't share my experiences, fears, or struggles with anyone who wasn't directly involved in the operation, and even my handlers were more interested in intelligence than emotional support. The stress of maintaining the deception while worrying about the safety of my family, if the operation was discovered, created chronic anxiety that affected my ability to function effectively in either identity. When I finally returned after the extraction, my relationships with family members had been permanently damaged by 2 years of lies and absence, and my inability to explain what I had really been doing made it impossible to rebuild the trust and intimacy that had been lost. Before I finish my story, I need something from you. If this video has impacted you in any way, if it's made you think differently about identity, about the psychological cost of deception, about the human price of intelligence operations, I need you to share it. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's someone in your family who's struggling with questions of identity and authenticity. Maybe it's a friend who's considering getting involved in activities that require deception or betrayal. Maybe it's a community leader who's trying to understand the psychological impact of gang warfare on individuals and families. Your share could help someone understand the importance of living authentically and the dangers of losing yourself in false identities. Your comment could reach someone who's dealing with the aftermath of deception or betrayal and needs to know that healing is possible. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to understand that some victories come at costs that are too high to justify, and that preserving your authentic self is more important than any tactical advantage. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. Whether you agree with everything I've said or not, whether my story resonates with you or challenges you, I want to know. This conversation doesn't end when the video stops. It continues in the comments, in the discussions you have with your families, in the choices you make about honesty, authenticity, and the relationships you build with others. So please take a moment right now to engage with this content. Your voice matters, your story matters, and together we can create understanding about the importance of living authentically and the psychological dangers of long-term deception. Share your own experiences with identity and authenticity. Tell me about times when you've struggled with questions of who you really are, or ask questions about how to rebuild trust and relationships after periods of deception or betrayal. To anyone watching this who's involved in activities that require deception, who's living a double life, or who's struggling with questions of identity and authenticity, I want you to know that you have the power to choose who you want to be and how you want to live. The psychological cost of maintaining false identities is higher than most people realize, and the damage to your mental health and relationships can be permanent if you don't find a way back to your authentic self. Living as someone else might seem like a solution to immediate problems, but it creates larger problems that become harder to solve over time. The skills required for successful deception, emotional detachment, manipulation, and the ability to suppress your real personality are skills that will damage your ability to form genuine relationships and live authentically even after the deception ends. If you're currently living a lie, if you're maintaining false identities, or if you're involved in activities that require you to betray the trust of people who care about you, I encourage you to find a way out before the psychological damage becomes irreversible. There are people who can help, resources available for those who want to change their lives, and alternatives to deception that don't require you to sacrifice your mental health and authentic relationships. My name is Marcus, and for 2 years I lived as Devon Johnson, a blood infiltrator deep inside enemy CRIP territory, who gathered intelligence that destroyed an entire criminal organization while nearly destroying my own mind in the process. Today I choose to be known as someone who survived the psychological torture of long-term deception and learned the importance of living authentically, who believes in the power of honest relationships and genuine identity, who works to help others understand the true cost of betrayal and deception. This is my story, my confession, and my warning about what happens when you live so deep in lies that you forget who you really are. The intelligence operation was successful by every tactical measure, but the human cost was devastating and permanent. The people I betrayed, the relationships I destroyed, the psychological damage I inflicted on myself and others, none of it can be undone, but it can serve as a warning to others about the true price of deception. If this video has impacted you, please don't just watch and move on. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts, your story, or your questions. Your engagement helps this message reach more people, and your voice adds to the conversation about authenticity, identity, and the importance of living truthfully. Remember, your authentic self is more valuable than any tactical advantage. Genuine relationships are more important than successful deceptions, and the psychological cost of living lies is always higher than the benefits they provide. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for choosing authenticity over deception. Stay true to yourself, value honest relationships, and never sacrifice your identity for temporary advantages.